Welcome to the Fearless Floyd Show. We'll begin in 2 minutes. Part 17, LeFlore on trust. What are trust and the historical transformation of trust? Panel 2, trust or gifts?
We're not even seeing you. We're only seeing you.
Oh,
You haven't
my
shared
bad.
your screen yet.
Dang it. I'm like moving too fast. Did y'all see that? I moved faster than the speed of light. Y'all missed everything.
Yeah, we just keep seeing Floyd.
All right, here we go. Trust, part 17. What are the trust and the historical transformation of trusts? Panel 2. Trusts are gifts. In reality, trusts are gifts. Most gifts are simple and only require that the donor has no reason to use a trust. In this case, the donor just delivers the assets, conveys realty, registers securities in the donee's name, or executes a deed of gift. This is a simple way to form a trust without all the paperwork needed. However, we can create these simple trusts if we only have a small gift we would like to donate to a person at this time. Otherwise, we need to use a trust to distribute all of our affairs after we are gone.
Guys, trusts were originally set up as gifts. They set them up in 1200 and something, when all the wars, the military, and everything else. It was a way for them to make sure that their lands were transferred correctly from one place to another. So say you just have a small gift that you want to give to somebody, and you don't really, have a whole lot of personal assets or anything like this. Small trust can be created just to donate a gift to somebody else.
Okay. All right, panel 3. In a simple trust, the gift is a two-party transfer from the transferor to the donor, or I'm sorry, transferor donor to the transferee donee. The trust, by contrast, entails a three-party relationship in which the donor settlor arranges with the trustee to divide the donee's interest between trustee and beneficiary. When the trust is formed and the trustee takes legal title of the property for the benefit of the beneficiaries, a normal private trust is essentially a gift, projected often. A normal private trust is essentially a gift projected upon the plane of time.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Essentially a gift projected upon the.
Yeah, put the time. Yeah, it got mixed up. Yeah,
Yeah.
changed it.
What should it be?
It should be to project on the plane of time and is subject to the manage of a trustee.
Plane of time is correct.
And yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't even think that was correct. All right. The plane of time, and is subject to be managed by a trustee. A normal private trust is essentially a gift projected upon the plane of time and is subject to be managed by a trustee. In the 14th and 15th centuries, trusts were set up as a way to donate gifts from one person to another. Today, the modern role of a trust is for managing financial assets.
So like I was saying, back in the 14th, 15th century, people were landholders and they wanted to make sure their land stayed in the family. So they would set up a simple trust to make sure that when they were gone, that the land stayed within the family. It all deals with the way you want to set up your trust. Today, trusts are so different than what they used to be.
Okay, now define plane of time in yeah, in 3-year-old layman terms.
All right, that deals with the time that we're in. Plane of time means when was it? Was it back then? Was it now? How are we dealing with it today? And how was it back then compared to what we're dealing with in the new trust laws and how we're dealing with laws of today?
All right, there you go. All right. I knew you were going to ask that question. Beat you to it. The early trusts. Back in the Middle Ages, the principal form of wealth was real estate. Back then, the primary purpose of the trust was to easily transfer the freehold land within the family. Before the law governing the transfer of freehold land was deeply afflicted by the federal restrictions meant originally to concentrate land holdings for military and the related advantages of using the trust to pass land between family members.
Okay, so this is what I'm saying. Trusts have been around for quite some time, 14th, 15th century, 1300s, 1400s. So basically back then when all the wars were going on and the governments or whoever, the kings, queens, whoever the rulers of the lands were, would try to seize people's property for their military purposes. So the trust protected the property, what they call freehold or freehold land, means that you held the land titles. They didn't hold the land titles.
Okay. Panel 5. I misstated a word. I said federal, and it's supposed to be feudal. The feudal land holding rules started to change after the lapse of the feudal system. One rule required that freehold land pass by descent rather than by will. This restricted the land and it was no longer divisible. New stricter laws came into effect that had rigid share of primogeniture, and dower. You definitely don't have to
That has to do with the great old language. You know, who is the dower? You know, your daughter, you give her a dowry when she's going to marry and stuff like that. This is all their language and how it used to be set up. They were like set up through dowries and dower. The dower is the person who receives the dowry or something like that.
Okay. This led to more bizarre fiscal exactions called wordship and marriage that functioned as pedal transfer taxes on minors.
Yeah, it all deals with how the dowries were set up, how they created more taxes because they were saying, well, if you're putting this in the dowry for this marriage or whatever, and each person had to have their dowry. The man had to have his from his family. She had hers from her family. They, you know, like said, okay, what's your dowry? What's our dowry? And then they would start taxing them and doing all kinds of stuff to it.
Okay. Many landowners made trust in order to protect themselves and their families against gross injustices of the system of land laws, which were centuries out of date. Still.
Yeah, you're right. They still are out of date. But back then, the only way that they could protect their trust and make sure, or their land, was to make sure that they locked them up in trust.
The trustees of the first trust or trust from the 14th and 15th centuries were merely stakeholder and were mainly nominees with no real powers or responsibilities to manage these trusts. The first trust merely gave the trustee the duty to hold on to settlers' property until death, and then they put themselves out of business when they conveyed the freehold land to the remaining beneficiaries. Back then, there were issues when a settler gave his property to a trustee to hold until his death. The trustee would accept the property, but when the time came to give or distribute this property, the trustee appropriated it to themselves.
Yeah, so back then there wasn't the laws that govern trustees. They were just well-to-do people. You trusted in them, you gave them your land title, you told them who it was going to go to when you died, and sometimes they took your land and your title away from you when you died. And the people didn't get what they were supposed to be getting.
All right. Moving on to panel 7. 14th century remedies. Covenant was the main contract writ of England law. At this time, it suffered 2 grievous shortcomings that rendered it ineffectual as a means of enforcing the trust deal. Under the writ of covenant, the plaintiff needed to have a contract that was a sealed instrument. If there wasn't one, or if the deed had been destroyed, stolen, or lost, the case was beyond remedy and covenant. At this time, the courts would only grant damages. The trust beneficiaries wanted the ancestral land, not the money for the damages.
So see, back then there was no guarantees. You had your land patent, your land title, and you entrusted it with somebody. They could say, oh my goodness, it got broken, land stolen, destroyed. We don't know what happened to it. So there was no title to pass on to the children. So the courts couldn't do anything except go after the beneficiary, or I mean the trustee who was holding on to that title, who says it got lost, and ask them to give monetary damages of money. But the kids didn't want the money, they wanted their land.
Absolutely. They're making plenty of money. They're not making any more land. Not unless you go to Dubai. 19th century. In the 19th century, the common law greatly restricted the assignability of choses in action.
Choses in action, yeah.
Choses in
How
action.
you chose, yeah, how you chose a person.
Assignability of choices in action. Choices in action. Sure, it's not choices.
It's, yeah, it's choices in action, how you choose somebody.
Yeah, choices.
Like I said, French comes in.
Yeah, yeah, no big. It's something when you're reading it, you just run into these like train wrecks with your tongue. And in the 19th century, the common law greatly restricted the assignability of choices in action. They treated the beneficiaries as having a property interest in the lands held in the trust. This was not just a claim derived from the settler. The trust sidestepped the rules against assignment. At this time, common law courts were simply incapable of taking evidence on the terms of the deal.
So lives are starting to change. Trusts are starting to evolve, and more people are starting to use trusts. So in the 19th century, they literally started to, look at the different laws. So what happened in the, 14th, 15th century, the trustees would steal the land. They were trying to make it where the beneficiaries who now were in the contract had their land. It was more protected.
Panel 9, tracking common law estates. Back then, the trust was primarily used as a path holding ancestral land. It was easy enough to conceptualize the beneficiary's interest not merely as a personal claim against the trustee, but as a right in the underlying trust property or equitable title. This made it easy for the chancellor to enforce the trust against the trustee's bare legal title.
Okay, so basically what we're doing is we're starting to get more into common law and estate law as we start progressing into the next era of the 19th, 20th century. So we're starting to look more into how we're getting to be protected through our trust, where they never protected us before through the trust.
There you go, panel 10. Testamentary trusts. In the 1660s, the barriers for devising real property were overcome. By then, it was quite common to create trust by will, or what they call testamentary trust. The testator devised land or other property to a person's name in his or her will. The trustees would hold the property for the beneficiaries that were named in the will. The testamentary trust was now common in modern practice.
So we do have different kinds of trusts. One is a gift trust, one is a testimonial trust. Testimonial trust is where we write down our testimony and we put it in a will. Then inside the will, we name who is going to benefit or receive what we have inside of our will. And at that time, we just gave it to a person to hold on to until we died. And that's all the trustee did at that time, was just hold on to our property.
Right. There you go. Okay. Panel 11. Taking a look at the first trust, we can see that the contract formation seems a little difficult for the descendant to conduct. We can start to see or understand why the contractarian model itself was primitive. Many did not characterize the testamentary trust as a contract between the descendant and the trustees named in the will. We know that the trust does not arise until the testator is dead. Therefore, the trustees may be said to have no one with whom to contract. Beneath the mechanics lies the contractarian reality of the trust.
So you guys, the old trusts were pretty primitive. And as we move forward, we start to revise our trusts. But in those times, they were so primitive that people just wrote down certain things on a piece of paper. They didn't really contract with one another correctly. There was a lot of errors made, and it was just the starting of figuring out how we can, save our property and move our property, keep our property and move it from one location to another, or to make sure it stays in our family.
There you go. Panel 12. The prototypical transfer by the trust agreement from a living settler to trustees exhibits both attributes of the law of contract and consensual formation. The trustee must voluntarily accept the trusteeship where they agree to serve under the terms of the trust. The terms are autonomy, which means that the trust laws are default law that can be altered in the trust instrument. This happens when a trust is created by will. The settler has essentially the same freedom to tailor the terms of the trust under a will as with an inter vivos trust.
Okay, inter vivos trust is like what we're making, revocable trust. We get to tailor our trust. We get to tailor how we want it. We get to, start structuring our trust to benefit us more. Back then, what they used to do is they started to understand what trustship meant and how we can make accountable for the trustees if they did something wrong. But back then, the trustees didn't have a whole lot of jobs to do. They were sort of limited. They just accepted the contract to hold on to this piece of paper until somebody died, and then they would, distribute whatever the property was. And they were holding the titles of these properties.
There you go. 13. A trustee has the same right to decline to serve as a trustee of any trust if the terms of the trust are not to their liking. By accepting a trusteeship, it is a consensual act. The appointment can come from the probate court that stood in for the descendant. At this time, the testamentary trustee decides if he wants to accept the trust on the terms and conditions in the trust instrument and the background default laws of trust. The person who is designated as trustee can now decline or accept the appointment. That means he has agreed to the trust deal. The trustee cannot negotiate with the trust. It is to take it or leave it type of appointment.
So guys, remember, if anybody tries to push you off as a trustee, you do not have to accept it. You can read the trust instrument, decide if it's feasible for you to be the trustee, if it's feasible for you to perform your duties, and to distribute the trust as the descendant wanted you to distribute it. So there's some trusts that they don't name trustees. There's other trusts they do. There's wills that need to go to court that, do not have the person to handle the probate. Everything else, the court will be responsible for assigning one of the people. You don't have to accept that assignment. It's all up to you.
Panel 14. You must realize that the executorship is a consensual fiduciary relationship like a trusteeship. You cannot appoint an executor of the will against their wishes. The law of estate administration is mostly default law that the testator's will can alter apart from measures designed to protect creditors' rights and other external interests. This means that executorship, just like trusteeship, will exhibit the twin features of contractarianism, consensual formation, and consensual terms of the will. The fiduciary law applicable to executors is virtually identical to that governing trustees.
Just like I'm saying, an executor or an executorship is also a trustship or a trusteeship. So basically, they put you down as the trustee. When they die, you become the executor. You are the executor to distribute the affairs of the trust. You don't have to accept it. Nobody has to accept it. But if you have agreed to it beforehand, then it's a good idea to go ahead and finish through with it. Usually when somebody is creating this, they'll explain it to you what your duties will be, and they'll ask you ahead of time are you going to accept this or you're not going to accept it? So that's when your name gets put down.
There you go. Oh, what the hell, Dean? All right. Management trust. The feudal restrictions on the transfer of real property that gave rise to the conveyancing type trust disappeared piecemeal from the 17th century to the earliest 20th century. The feudal land laws are no longer needed to be evading the trust. Hold on. The feudal land laws are no longer needed to be evading the trust has endured because of the changes in its functions. That doesn't make sense.
Okay, so before they used trust
Uh-huh.
because there were so many crazy land laws that they were
Right.
trying to steal the land from the people. So now in the 20th century, between the 17th and the 20th century, we no longer need those type of trust because the laws are changed. They're changed the laws to, you know, benefit the trust and benefit the property and save the property inside the trust.
Okay. All right. The feudal land laws created trust, which are no longer needed or be evaded. The trust has endured because of the changes in functions.
Yeah, the different functions of the trust have all been changed. As the laws change, they change the functions of the trust.
Okay. All right, there you go. The trust has the trust has ceased to be a conveyancing device for holding freehold land and has become instead a management device for holding financial assets.
Right, before when the trusts were created, all they were for was to hold land. That was the only trust they created. Now, today, we create trusts to hold land plus our assets.
Right. Today, the management of trust is a response to the change we see it has come away from family real estate as a dominant form of wealth. Today, we are seeing that wealth in the commercial age is made up largely of promises. Today, modern wealth takes on the form of financial assets such as stocks, bonds, mutual funds, insurance contracts, pension plans, and bank deposits. Today, the trust holds a portfolio of complex financial assets, which are contract rights against the insurers. This portfolio requires active and specialized management in contract to conveyancing trust that merely held ancestral land.
So today, trusts are growing. We're being able to put all kinds of different things in our trust, and they're becoming more difficult to manage. Before it was simple. You put your land in your trust, you ask somebody to hold the land title. When you died, that person was supposed to deliver the land to whoever was on the title or whoever you designated that piece of land to. Now, today, we have tons of assets that are going in our trust, and we need a manager that can manage these assets. So when we're gone, they'll be able to distribute them correctly.
Exactly. Conclusion. And panel 17, last but not least, we can see the evolution of trust from the 12th, 13th, 14th, and 15th centuries until what we are today. Back then, trusts were created to pass land from one member to the next in the family. When trusts were first established, they were used to pass gifts from one family member to another. Now, today, trust contains large portfolios that are used to store the assets in our trust and need a person to administer the trust. We've come a long way with trust over the years.
We sure have. I mean, look way back in the 12th century. All we cared about was our land. Now, today, we care about these huge portfolios, bonds, stocks, promissory notes, whatever we collect, and whatever, is our assets. We want to protect all of our assets. Back then, they didn't have all these type of assets. Their biggest asset was land, and that's why they made trust, was to protect their land. Today, we make trust to protect everything that we own.
Our indentures, our debentures, and investments, and derivatives, and collateralized debt obligations, mortgage-backed securities, and yeah. Back then, I would trade you some herbs for some spices. Remember?
I thought you were going to tell me about your mixed tickets that you put in your trust to trade them for something else. I don't know.
You actually got a 1-for-1 deal. You
My
walk away
season
satisfied.
tickets.
It's like, yeah, I took a bunch of Federal Reserve notes and walked away with some collateralized debt obligations.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I don't even know what they are. Just sounded cool. Thank you for hanging around after the show. I want to present to you Tailor Made Trust, featuring LeFlore's Trust Series, available at tailormadetrust.com, as well as the fearlessfloydshow.com store. Here are a handful of the available trusts that can be built, custom tailored to your needs and desires. 25 different trusts, plus the DNA Trust Addendum. And as always, LeFlore's classic trusts and ancillary classes, and also Anne's books on trust and specialty trust, which I also co-authored. If you'd like to get a class, a book, or have a trust custom built for you, always available at the fearlessfloydshow.com store. And I'll see you in the next show. Thank you for watching and have an awesome day.